This is the recording of the Amudim that I missed, so I'm catching up today on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. We'll start on Tes Zayin Amud Beis, the last line. So we had said a number of different rabbis, how they finished Shemana Esrei, different things that they said. The order, I'm not 100% sure on. So for example, we say, Rabbi Yochanan Basar the Messiah Tzluse Amar Hachi. So we understand Rabbi Yochanan, but why would Rabbi Yochanan come after Belezer? We start out the Gemara by saying Rabbi Belezer bought the Messiah Tzlusa. Belezer is a student to Rabbi Yochanan. Then we have Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia is before Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia is still the time of Rabbi, of Rav. Then we have Rabbi Zero, again, who's after Rabbi Yochanan. And then after Rabbi Chia we have Rav. And then after we say Rabbi bought the Tzlusa. So I don't really understand the order. That's number one. Number two, there is a Nefesh Chaim that people quote. The Nefesh Chaim writes in I think it's the second thing is this section two. The Nefesh Chaim writes that Shemana Esrei is kol every desire that a person has. That when the Anshe Nesai put together Shemana Esrei, somehow they managed to put into every word is pregnant with meaning. And it is so deep that any possible permutation of bakashas, of thoughts, of feelings, it's included all in the Shemana Esrei. Certainly the Shemana Esrei is very, very deep, and certainly it is fertile and fecund and pregnant and laid with meaning and meaning. But if clearly these rabbis are adding in additional tefillas at the end of their Shemana Esrei, they obviously felt that they had not accomplished saying this during the Shemana Esrei, and that's also why it's permitted to add in, let's see, by Refleinu to talk about, or by Baruch Aleinu, or by any of the Baruch Shemit Tefillah to talk about the things that a person finds specific to themselves in their own language, and it's a good thing, right? That also personalizes the Shemana Esrei. Okay, continues the Gemara. Psaf from Basa Tluse Amar Hachi. So when Reb Safra would finish davening Shemana Esrei, he would say as follows: Yiratzin l'fanacha Hashem Elokeinu, shetosim shalom b'pamalia shel malo b'pamalia shel mato. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu should make a peace, should make shalom in the heavenly retinue, and therefore that will have a direct impact on the life down here. As Rashi explains, because every nation has a sar in Shemayim, and when the sarim on top are fighting and they're not getting along, then we have problems down here among the nations. It's a reflection of the world up there. And so therefore, by davening for the Pamal Shalmal, that there should be Shalom, then there will be a peace down here. People won't be fighting. And additionally, Rav Safar said that there should be Pamal Shalmal should be peace, but also Pamal Shalmata. Rashi explains, B'chabur Sachachomim, meaning people obviously disagree when they're learning and they're fighting and learning. And at the end of the day, that is part of the Chamta Shel Torah, and that's a wonderful thing. But ultimately, when you leave in peace. That's the goal, that it's not personal, it's just to understand the truth. What is the Ritzain HaBeirei? And so Rav Safar davening for peace, both in Pamal Shamal, which would lead to physical peace, not war on earth, and also Pamal Shamata among the Chabur Sachachomim. Uvein HaTalmidim HaOiskim B'Torasechom, Bein Oiskin Lishma, Bein Oiskin Shalei Lishma. So Rav Safar also davened that there should be peace not just among the Chachamim, but also the Talmidim or Oiskim in Torah, that they should also have peace whether or not they were Oisik Lishma or Shalei Lishma. It sounds like what he's saying is Bein HaTalmidim HaOiskim B'Torasechom, Bein Oiskin Lishma, Bein Oiskin Shalei Lishma, that the word is that there should be peace among the Talmidim, whether those Talmidim are learning Lishma or Shalei Lishma. But it's not peace between those that are learning Shema and those that are not learning Shema. It should be peace among all the Talmidim, whether they're learning the Shema or Shalei Lishma. Because you need peace even among the Talmidim who are learning the Shema. You need peace even among, especially perhaps among those who are learning Shalei Lishma. And then the Gemara continues, and a separate prayer that those who are learning Shalei Lishma should learn Lishma eventually. As we know, Mitach Shalosh Ma Bashma, later on in the Gemara today, we're going to have a further explanation of this point, and we'll see the Rashi and Taisus about the idea that somebody who's Isaac and Torah Shalei Shema is Nachle Shalei Livra. That's better that he shouldn't have been born. And here it sounds like we want peace for those people. So maybe we'll do a sneak preview. So the answer is basically it depends on the kind of Shalei Shema. The Shalei Shema that somebody's learning for kavod, somebody's learning Shalei Shema for a shidduch, somebody's learning Shalei Shema for a job. Those are all Shalei Shemas that hopefully one day they get Lishma. Someone's learning Shalei Shema the canter. Somebody's learning Shalei Shema just to cause problems, then that such a person is Nerech L'Shalei Nivra. However, it could be Rav Safra was davening for such a person as well. It could be Rav Safra is when he's davening Chalesh and Shalei Shema Yiras and Shiu Aiskan L'Shema. He's asking for everybody. Everybody who learns Shalei Shema, maybe they should all get L'Shema, even though what we say is Mitzvah Shalei Shema B'Shema only applies to those who are not learning the content. Could be a distinction between these two aspects, as we'll see later on today. Rabbi Alexandri, Basat Salusa, Rabbi Alexandri, after he finished davening, Amar Hachi. We're going to see that maybe it wasn't Rabbi Alexandri in a second, but before we go any further, just to point out that the idea of having a name of Rabbi Alexandri is not comparable to the Gemara in Gittin Yud Aleph. Now, there's a Gemara in Gittin Yud Aleph that tells you that the Ruba Shemus of the Yisrael Keshemus Hagayim, that was a common theme in the times already of the Gemara, that people had a lot of non-Jewish names. The idea, however, that the name of Alexander could very well in that era they didn't have non-Jewish names. Now we're coming to Hanukkah in the next week. It could very well be that people who are Hellenizers, they adopt all the customs. If you look in the dictionary, you'll see that the definition of a Hellenist, people who adopted Greek ways, especially in the old dictionaries for sure. I'm not sure about the new ones, but I think online I checked last year by Hanukkah time, it still says especially a Jew. In other words, the Jews adopted the Greeks the most, and they certainly adopted the Greek names and culture and all that. But among the Frum, why would they have a name like Alexander? Right? And again, this, to be clear, this has nothing to do with the wider topic of having a non-Jewish name. The Medrash is not actually a Medrash that says this, but we have adopted a amalgamation of Midrashim as one Medrash. That the Medrash says Shalashinu Shemar Malbushim and L'Shainim. That's the schus that they were nigal by the time of Mitzrayim. There are Midrashim that have aspects of all of them, but sometimes they have 4, sometimes they have 2, sometimes they have different ones. But for our purposes now, Shalashinu Shemam, which was a big deal then, it's not such a big deal. A famous shuv for Moshe, who says that after Matan Torah, it was okay to have a shame of a guy. That's not such a big deal. When it was before the Zman of Matan Torah, so you need a shame of a Yid in order to separate yourself out. Once you already have a Torah, then that's what separates you from the non-Jew, not the name. Which would help explain why so many people had names of Goyim throughout the generations. But this still is not edifying for Rabbi Alexandri. The name specifically Alexander came about even if people were naming their kids only Jewish names. It was a special exception for Alexander, because remember, when Antiochus Epiphanes goes against the Yidden, that's already long after the time of Alexander the Great. By the time of Alexander the Great, there was peace among the Jewish people and the Greek Empire. Alexander the Great, the Gemara Yuma tells us that Shimon HaTzadik went to go meet him, complained about the Shemren who was starting up, and Alexander the Great gave permission because he said, I see this man in my dreams. He comes before me, and the Gemara had a question there in Yuma. How could Shimon HaTzadik go out to go greet Alexander the Great wearing the Shemanim Begadim? It's also outside of Beis HaMikdash. Maybe one of the answers of the Gemara was, Eis Las Hashem Efeu Torah Secha. In any event, Alexander the Great gives permission to the Jews to take revenge on their enemies. So they give a big zet to the Shemrenim. And so as a result of that, there's a medrash that brings down that it became a custom for the Jewish people to name their kids after Alexander the Great. So this is not a raya, anything on the larger question of giving non-Jewish names to one's children. It says in more, Alexander Basat Lusa, after Alexander, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem should place us in a lit corner, not in a dark one. That our heart should be excited, that it should be not dampened, our spirits, our eyes should be alive, not dark. Ikidami harav hamnuna matzili la Rav Alexandri basa the matzili hachi amar hachi. So some say this is not actually Rav Alexandri's tefillah. This is Rav Hamnuna's tefillah. So now we already learned about Rav Hamnuna in the what do you call it, in the parak before, right? So we already just learned about Rav Hamnuna and his Berachas Hamazon and Yud Alpha Base. The Gemara told us about that Rav Hamnuna would say the brach Ramnun Amar Asher brach Abon Mikol Amin. The Nasan Lanu as Torah Soibarach Ata Hashem Nesin Torah. And the Gemara over there said that Ramnun was Mu'ulam from them. So here, maybe this is Ramnun's tefillah afterwards, where he would say this following idea that Hashem should place us in a lit corner, and that our hearts and eyes and everything should do well and not be darkened. Maybe that's Rav Hamnun, maybe it's Rav Alexandria. Either way, the Gemara then says another version of what Rav Alexandria could have said. Rav Alexandria both said, that you know that our desire, our dreams, our deepest will is to do what you want. What stops us is the Sa'ar Shabisa, as Rashi says, Yetzirah Shebelevavenu Hamachmitzenu. No, this is the Yetzirah that's Machmis, the Yetzirah that causes things to become chametz, right? This is a reference to Mechilta. Right? We learn out there in the Pasha of Boi about the mitzvah of matzos, that we're supposed to do this reason makdim mitzvahs, right? The Gemara in Avodah Zarah and Chaf about always to be a Ruach HaKodesh, to get to the Nevuah, you have to be a Zaris. To become close to the Rebbe Shalom, there has to be zrizas in mitzvahs. You can't do things languidly, placidly. You can't do it just slowly. You have to be a Zaris. So Rav Nuna, it was maybe the one before, so this was Rav Alexandri. Rav Alexandri is saying, we want to do this. We really have the deepest will that we would like to do this. But what's stopping us? Two things. One, Sa'ar Shabi, so the Yitzhar, it's machmetz, he slows things down. He says, look, you're too tired. It's late in the morning. You can't get, it's dark in the morning. You can't get up at this hour. It's not comfortable. It's too cold. Lots of reasons. Or Shiva Malchias, Nebuchadnezzar, Jewish people have been under the thumb of various empires throughout the centuries, and so therefore they promulgate all sorts of laws and problems. Very difficult to be able to do what you want when we are stuck under the thumb of these rulers. Maybe your will eventually should save us from their hands. And that we should be able to do your commandments, keep your Torah with a full of hearts. Rava had his own way that he concluded the davening. We know this well because of the fact that we have adopted it into the Rosh Hashanah Kippur, as we'll see. So what did he say? Rava said, right, until I was created, I wasn't worth anything. Now that I was created, I'm still nothing. I'm mamish nothing now when I'm alive. Right? This is the joke about in the Vardik, right? To be nothing was a big deal. It's the highest level. So the joke in the Vardik went that there was a new boy to the yeshiva, and the older brachim was sitting there and they're darshaning, I'm a nothing because of this, I'm a nothing. And the new boy comes into the yeshiva and he starts saying, I'm a nothing. And all the brachim look at each other and say, he thinks he's a nothing, right? But the truth is, we know that when we consider the magnitude of our life relative to, say, the 6.5 billion or so people in the world, and then compare this planet to the solar system, like put the solar system to this galaxy, right? I mean, the galaxy compared to how many billions of galaxies, like the infinite speck of dust that is this earth, but not even a kernel of a speck that is us. This is offer. Pashut, we're offer b'chayai kal v'chomer b'misasi. We're mamish like dust during our lifetimes, kal v'chomer after our death. Harei ani l'fanecha kechlim malibusha chlima. We are before you, the Rebbeinu Shalom, like mamish, full of like a cup that will be full of shame. And whenever we have sinned, Right? We hope that we don't sin, but whatever we have, we ask the Rebbeinu Shalom to be mechik to erase it from our cheshbon. But please not with Yisurim v'chaloim roim. Right? This brings back to mind the Gemaras that we had at the beginning of Brachot, right on Hay. The Gemaras that told us that when a person that Rav Chizda said, "Imroya Adam sheYisurim boin alav yifash reish b'maisav." You have to see what you do, right? It's not as the Gemara told us, on earlier in Brachos there, the Gemara had mentioned the Maisa on Hayam Beis. The Gemara said about Rav Huna Takifle Abram Me'adina Dechamer, that he had a bunch of bad wine that went bad. So the Gemara says they went to visit him, and they said La'ayin Mar B'Milei. They say, you should look at what you're doing. Look at what your problem is in life. So I'm a little Michashina Beinach said, do you have problems with me? Do you think I'm Mechashi for something? So they said to him, do you think HaKadosh Baruch is punishing you by having your wine go bad, by having your parnasa go bad for not a good reason? You're saying that you shouldn't have to be mefashish your ma'asav. Why not? If you're not mefashish your ma'asav, that means because you're totally just and all that you do, then the Rebbeinu Shalom is not just in what he does. Now, obviously, there was an option, which they didn't say to him, but there was an option that it could have been Yisur and Shalava, right? The Gemara does say over here, and that's Sugya, that you could reach a level of Yisur and Shalava, somebody who doesn't have any issues of Chatoim, and the Gemara told us that then you should do and say maybe it's Bittul Torah. And if somebody doesn't even have Bittul Torah, then you know it's Yisur and Shalava. So what we're saying over here is that Rav is saying, look, at the end of the day, we all have problems, we all have things. Right? Everybody falls. So a person should understand that just because they fall and just because they have a problem and they have to get a kapara, they ask the Brachot, he can mechaper us in Yom Kippur without giving us major sicknesses. He can mechaper us without giving us major yisurin. So we're asking for Kodesh Baruch to give us a forgiveness without any major problems in our life. And this was the Vida of Rav Nuna Zute on Yom Kippur. Fine. Which is how as they say, we have adopted it now. Mar Brei de Ravina, so Mar, the son of Ravina, when he would finish the davening, so he would say the following. We know this because we've adopted it in our daily one. The kind that saw the Shoni Mirah. When I say daven to Ben Shalom, they should protect our mouths, you protect our tongues from evil. So we ask the Ben Shalom to protect ourselves from speaking evil, malicious speech. And for those that are cursing us, for those who are bad intentions, so they should be silenced. And our souls, our egos, should be like offer to everybody. In other words, we shouldn't take us slight. We shouldn't be angry. And every time we get somebody, forgets us, somebody talks a negative thing about us, we should be able to overlook it. Hashem should open our hearts to learn the Torah and to chase the mitzvahs. Hashem should be able to save us, please, from bad interactions, from the Yetzer Hara, from a bad wife. Obviously, this part we've excised out of our daily recitation of the Lokai Netzar. We're asking Hashem to save us from the bad things that happen in the world. And anybody's thinking about us to do negative to us, to hurt us, to give us problems in some way, please, Hashem, be made for their bad machshavas about us and change it up. May it be the will of the Rebbeinu Shalom that Imrei Fi, that the words of my mouth, that I just said the whole Shemona Esrei, be right, and my thoughts, L'fanach Hashem Tzuri V'Gal Hashem, who is my Redeemer and my Rock. In other words, as we had mentioned already before, the Yiratan Refi V'Gal L'fanach Hashem Tzuri V'Gal, they could have been mentioned in the beginning of Shemona Esrei, but we decided to put it at the end because of the fact that where it appears in Tehillim, it appears at the end of the 18 chapters, and so therefore it's clear that it's supposed to come at the end of the 18 benedictions in the Shemona Esrei. Next, Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan came and signed Sifra De'iyav. So now we finished discussing all the people that when they finished Shemona Esrei, what they did. And now we talk about some other lines. Rabbi Yochanan came and signed Sifra De'iyav. This tells us Rabbi Yochanan knew Eiv. If you remember back, we had the Gemara also, it was on Hayam and Al. The Gemara had mentioned over there that Reish Lakish had a word that Reish Lakish had said, Kol Oisik B'Torah, Yisurim B'Delin Heimenu. Anybody who studied Torah, he would be able to, get rid of any Yisurim. And his pasuk, his proof text was B'nei Reshef Yigbiu Uf, which was a pasuk in Eiv. And over there, Rabbi Yochanan got annoyed. Rabbi Yochanan said, "No, I feel Tunegah Shal Beis Rab and Yodinus. Even the kids know this. Why do you have to go to Eiv? You don't have to go to study Eiv because it says that pasuk in Chumash and pasuk in Parashat B'Shalach Kol HaMachla Shesantim Mitzrayim Le'asim Alecha Keni Hashem Reifecha." As Rashi explained over there, I feel like time Shlei Gil Sefer Eiv Kvar Alam. Everyone knows this, so you don't need to go to Sefer Eiv. But it didn't mean to say that Rabbi Yochanan himself didn't learn Eiv. Here you have a great proof about learning Tanakh. Rabbi Yochanan himself, right, the author of the Yerushalmi, he studied Eiv, and it sounds like he did it more than once, because having Messiah and Sefer Eiv, when he would finish, it sounds like this was a normative thing for him to study Eiv, and then when he would finish Eiv, he would say as follows. What did he say? So he has to play on the end of the psukim there. Rabbi Yochanan, okay, Messiah Sefer Eiv, Amar Hachi Seif Adam Lamus, V'Seif Be'em L'Shchita. The end of each person is that they die. The end of the animals is that they get geshachten. V'achol misa heim aimdu. Everybody dies. No one escapes. Not yet. There's never been a person, at least in recorded history, forget the people who jumped into Gan Eden, Maisa of the Shuvin Levi, the Maisa with Zelia Novi, etc., Chanoich, forget all that. But people don't escape the Grim Reaper. This is how it is. So Asher Misha Gadol B'Torah V'Amal B'Torah, right, is praised. Lucky is the one who is studying Torah and puts his efforts, his energies into understanding Torah. And makes a nachas ruach for the Rebbeinu Shalom v'Gadol B'Shem Tov v'Niftar B'Shem Tov. Right, he came into this world and is raised with a Shem Tov. He goes out of it as well. When he said Kehelas Tov Shem V'Shem Tov V'Yem Hamos V'Yem Yivoldoi. It's better to have a good name than to be rich. And the day of death is better than the day one is born. Again, the basic premise of this kind of an argument is as follows: that a person, when they have life still in front of them, have the option to do bad. And while certainly it is incomparable, one moment as we learn Mishnah Avos, one moment here of being able to do Torah mitzvahs and tshuva compared to the whole Chai Olam Haba, it's simply not incomparable. Nevertheless, once the person is finished in this world, then you can take into account. You can now the chickens can be counted. Now you see all the ma'asim tovim, all the good things that the person did. Now it comes back. So if they've lived a good life, not an irresolute life, if they've lived a resolute life, if they've lived not a dissolute life, that's I think the word I want. If they lived a wonderful life, if they've learned, if they've done mitzvahs, if they've done all the things that they were asked to do, so they're leaving now B'Shem Tov, so they no longer have the possibility of doing bad, and it's now forever that they were great. And now that's etched into eternity, and so they're able to get all the good from the world to come. Finish the Gemara. This is a common trope that Reb Meir used to say. Gamor says in pasuk b'chol levav v'chol nafshecha, right? Ladas is darky. You're supposed to be, doing the love of the Rebbeinu Shalom after Hashem b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol me'adecha. So what are you doing with all your heart, all your soul? Ladas is darky. To know the Rebbeinu Shalom's ways. V'alachta b'drachav. Right? You're supposed to try to emulate Emet Tzio Day. You're supposed to follow the Rebbeinu Shalom. Ma'hu rach, ma'fatorach, ma'hu chan nafatocha, v'lishkat al dalsi. Right? And to be shaken on the Rebbeinu Shalom's door. In other words, to try to emulate, to try to live a life of spirituality, to try to live a life of connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and ideally mirroring his ways, his supernal ways, his infinite ways, but in the little bit that we can discern from here in this world, in this earth, how the Rebbe Shalom is manning, how he's manning the Olam to be able to do the same. So it continues the Gemara Tarasi. Sorry. Margaret whom do I marry? Go b'chol vav chol nafsh chol das is dark v'lishkol dalsid terasi. The tzar terasi b'limcha v'neged einecha tia yeresi. Right, so the person should have when watching over the Torah in their hearts and should have the Eretz Hashem in their eyes. And shemar picha mikol chet, the person's mouth should be prevented from any sins. The Torah v'kodesh atzah b'chol mikol ashma, and the person should be holy and pure from all sins. And the Gershom, as it were, then will be with the person in all places. In other words, if a person is b'chol v'chol takes it very seriously to understand their Gershom ways, to hang out by the steps of Torah, to watch the Torah in their hearts, and to watch their eyes, and to watch their mouth, and always mikash themselves from sins. So then you're effectively being mekabel malchus shemayim, not just by the time that you say Shema, but everywhere you go, the whole life. So then Hashem is going to, by definition, be with you at all times and in all places. This is a common trope by the rabbis in Yavne. Remember that the rabbis had gone to Yavne after Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai had gotten permission from Vespasian to keep them sustained, to keep them alive, not to hurt them. The rabbis had gone to Yavne because they didn't want to stay anymore in Lishkas HaGoz. They didn't want to do capital punishments anymore. They left and they moved on. So the Sanhedrin is sitting there, and we're talking here. There's the Margala B'Pumayu D'Rabbanan. This is a common thing that the rabbis would say. That is to say, we're not talking here about one of the students. Right, we're talking here about the rabbis. Rashi says, "There was a rogel b'fiv." This was a normal thing that they used to say, but not the students. This is the rabbanon themselves. So the Gemara says that what do they say? Ani beria, v'chaveri beria. I'm a knacker. My buddy's a knacker. Ani malachte be'ivu malachte b'sadeh. We both work. I work in town. He works in the field. What does it mean? I work in the town and he works in the field. What's the difference? Well, the difference is that if one is working in the town, then one is going to have more time to study. And if one is working in the field, one has much less time to study. Remember the Gemara said on Dal and Beis, we had the Gemara. The Gemara told us there about we want to make sure when the guy comes home from the field that he's going to study. Right, that he's not gonna leave a night and say he's gonna go to sleep and eat, and then he's gonna forget to say Shema. No, what should he do? The person should understand about themselves when they work hard. It's hard now at night not to just sit down on the couch, relax a little bit, and then you forget the whole night goes away. You didn't have a chance to learn, you didn't have a chance to say Kriya Shema. So what a person should do is to have a seder at night. They should go to the base medrash, etc., and then that will ensure that they daven, that they're learning, and then of course they always will find time to eat. So the Gemara is saying here that the rabbis in Yavne, it's an incredibly egalitarian Gemara, that you're in the yeshiva much more, you're learning much more. Why? Because you're local. He is working in the field. He's much less able to learn. So what should you say? And this is not a Magal Pumei D'Rabbanan. Who this is in Yavna. This is like the greatest school of the Jewish people. This is what they would say. We're each getting up to work. I do mine. He does his. Just like he doesn't come in on my territory, I don't go in on his territory. So maybe you're gonna say, okay, I learn more and he learns less because I'm local and he's not. We learn that nevertheless, as long as you're having a kavanah, as long as you're having the right intentions, somebody who does less is not necessarily less than the one who does more. We had this Gemara already on Mehem Beis, and actually the Gemara told us there. Rabbi Yochanan came to visit Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer was ill, so he was crying. Rabbi Lezer, so he asked him why you're crying, and one of the things he said as a possibility, he said maybe. Maybe didn't learn enough. We learned that as long as you are doing your best, then you are fine. Rashi takes this Gemara even further than we just said. Rashi understands. Look at Rashi. Ani ha'esek b'Torah beria. Ani v'chein chaverei am ha'aretz beria. Rashi is mashma, the guy in the field who is working. He's mamash and ha'aretz. Again, it's not so clear from the Gemara the Gabi and ha'aretz, but certainly a less learned fellow. And that was a very egalitarian Gemara to say that those who learned were pretty tolerant of those that were not such big learners, because for the limited time that they had, they nevertheless took their time seriously and tried to learn as much as they could. This was a common trope by Abai. A person should be clever in the way they are fearing the Rebbe Shalom. Right? Like the Pasuk says, Ma'anei Rach, Meshev Chema. Right? A soft response is going to be able to calm down anger. A person should be increasing the peace with his family, friends, and all the people. Feel in B'shuk, even mamash, the guy in the shuk. The person should be of lamata. A person should be beloved here in this world and upstairs in the celestial realms, and should be accepted by all people. Nobody ever said Shalom Aleichem to Rabbi Yechim and Zakkai. He always would go Shalom Aleichem to them first. Should be pointed out, we had the Gemara before. Remember, we had the Gemara earlier. The Gemara had told us on Bavim and Beis. The Gemara had said on the bottom that if you know the person is going to say Shalom to you, then you should say Shalom to them first. That, to me, is the key of this Gemara of Rabbi Yechim and Zakkai. It's about reciprocity. As a general matter, people like to be reciprocated to. That's what the Gemara in Tzadiyah from Bava Basra, that Abayis didn't want to invite Manoach, Ivtzam, because of the fact that he had no kids and he wouldn't invite him back. The Rambam, in famous Rambam, tells us in Hilchos Ishus, Perek Yud Gimel, Halachah Yud Aleph, about the woman who has to be let out of her home to go to life cycle events by her neighbors and friends, because otherwise they won't come to hers. People like reciprocity. So what happens if they say Shalom Aleichem to somebody and they don't reciprocate? So right over there, the Gemara told us on Vav, it's like stealing. Fine. But the general matter, why do people not say Shalom Aleichem first? It's because this guy, he didn't even notice me. He's not seeing me when I'm walking by, so I don't see him either. No, the idea of no reciprocity needed. You go say Shalom Aleichem first. You don't wait a minute. This is what Rabbi Yechim and Zakkai did. So there's one point, a bit of a discordant note to just note, is that there's a Meiri in the end of Hanazakin in Gittin. The Meiri seems to suggest that the reason he said Shalom, he would say Shalom first. He wouldn't say Shalom Shalom. He said Shalom. It was like a way of, like, if you say Shalom first, then you're able to dominate the conversation in terms of how long its duration is going to be. Rabbi Yechim and Zakkai has no time. Everyone wants to say Shalom Aleichem to Rabbi Yechim and Zakkai. So you say Shalom, then it's limited to Shalom. He doesn't have to get into a whole conversation with you. Maybe so, in which case, then it was not only very nice, but also strategic. Continues the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Rava. So this is a common trope that Rava said, right? We had Rava before where he said Basat Klusa. Now we have a common aphorism that Rava used to say. What did he say? Tachlas Chachma Shuva Maisim Tevim. The Tachlas of Chachma is Shuva and Maisim Tevim. The person shouldn't study, shouldn't learn, and become a big Talmid Chacham. What's he using the Torah for? To go fight with his parents, to go fight with Rabbeim, to go fight with people who are bigger than him. What's the beginning of wisdom? Is the fearing of God. It's a good thing, a good wisdom for those that are its practitioners. So the Gemara says, Lo Isim, Lo Nema. It doesn't say in Pasuk. It doesn't say in Pasuk Hashem Seichel Tov Lo Isim. Doesn't say that. It says L'chol Oiseihem. Why does it say that? It says the Gemara Lo Isim Lo Nema Lo Isim Lo Isim L'Shma Lo Isim Shlashma. It's for the people that are doing it L'Shma. It's a Seichel Tov for those, but not for those that are doing it Shalei L'Shma. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? The Gemara continues. I'm sorry. Anybody does who learns Shalei L'Shma, it's better that he shouldn't be born. Again, as I mentioned already before, Rashi Tesis point out, what are you talking about? We say Lo'elam Yasik Adam B'Torah in the bottom Tesis. Lo'elam Yasik Adam B'Torah B'Mitzvahs. Afil Shalei Shema Shem Ter Shalei Shema B'Al Shema. So what are you talking about? You say that it's better they shouldn't be born. We say a person should come to L'Shema. That's the answers because we're talking about a situation of L'Kanter. So by L'Kanter we say it's better than not to learn. And nevertheless, like I said, I think what we could say is that Tzafra was davening for even people who will counter. Tzafra was including everybody. I should mention, I just noticed I skipped the top Taisus here. The Taisus said, "V'nafshi gofer lakol tia," in Ophel and Rava's thing that we I'm sorry, Ma'aber Ravina's thing that we have adopted for our daily recitation after the Shemana Esrei. So we daven that v'nafshi ka'afel lakotia, our souls should be like the dust. What do you mean the dust? Is that a good thing? Yeah, it's a good thing because Hakadosh Baruch Hu blessed the Jewish people. So in other words, you can't go below the dust. The ground, that's the lowest you can go, and it will always be around. So earth, you can't destroy the dust, you can't destroy the earth, and it continually produces. So therefore, we're saying the nafshi ka'afel lakotia, we should be like the dust, meaning we'll still be around. We can't be destroyed, and it will continue to produce. Rav said as follows. This world and the next world are very different. The next world is not like this world. There's no physical kinds of attributes. Again, what does this mean when we talk about Olam Haba? Does this mean Gan Eden? Does this mean Tchias HaMesim? Does this after Tchias HaMesim? Like, what are we talking about? For the moment, we just will believe it as Olam Haba. There's no eating, drinking. There's no intimacy. There's no business. There's no sinna. There's no kinna. It's basically everybody sitting at Hashem and enemies of Shechina, and they are enjoying the awareness of their Rebbeinu Shalom. Again, how this pasuk is a raya is sort of mind-boggling. Pasuk of this is they were staring at their Rebbeinu Shalom, they were eating and drinking, and yet we're seeing that as a proof that they weren't eating and drinking. Okay, we have to leave that on the side. I would just point out that this also brings out the Gemara, the end of Tainus there, where the Gemara says that will be the end of time, that they'll make a circle around their Rebbeinu Shalom, and they're going to say, Hashem, this is it seems a bit of a different version or a different understanding of what the next life is going to be. If we look at the Gemara later on, we're going to have on Yud Ches Amabez, where the Gemara talks about the Mesifta Dirakia. The Mesifta Dirakia, the Gemara is Mashma the Olam Haba is like a yeshiva, and it's Levi, not in the yeshiva, and like that seems to be the common understanding of what Olam Haba is. And this one is very different. This is more of a Maimonidean approach to Olam Haba. Continues the Gemara. Says the Margadel Haftarah Shefticha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hashem gave a greater promise to the woman more than the men. What does it mean? What are the women getting that is greater than the men? So Rashi says, "Sharei Karan she'ananis u'beitzches." What does it mean? It says the pasuk in Yeshaya, "Shenamar noshim she'ananis kaimana shemana kerle banos beitzches hazena imrasi." What does this mean? What is the woman being promised that she is going to be assured of her place in the world to come? She's going to be assured of her eventual success. Says the Rav said to Rav Chia, how are women going to have the zchus? In what sense are they going to get to Olam Haba? They're not studying Torah. Whether they should or shouldn't study Torah, or could or couldn't study Torah, again, that's the more insight to Chafaf. That's not for right now. Nevertheless, for the purposes here, Rav asked Rav Chia how a woman zaycha. So Rav Chia responded, "Ba'akar b'nai lebeiknishta ba'asunai gavar be'rabbanan v'nafshan gavar ad asul mi'be'rabbanan." So Rav Chia explained that they bring their kids to the yeshiva and they wait for the husbands until they come back from the yeshiva. Rashi points out it's coming from a yeshiva outside of town, not local town. V'nafshan gavar says Rashi, Torah they let him learn in a different area. Again, that brings up the Gemara in Ksubas Samach Beis about whether or not that's in fact what was commonly happening. It sounds like over in that Gemara that people were going to learn without the rishus of their wives, and they sometimes had difficult situations as a result as of that. But nevertheless, the Gemara is telling you that women are going to have a special zchus and they can be beitech, and that it's not a situation where they have to come out with a right sugi or not. So long as they are putting in the effort to keep their husbands and their children engaged in the life of Torah mitzvahs, that is a guarantee of their success in the meriting the next world. I do wonder what the connection of this Gemara was to the previous Gemara, and perhaps the connection is because the previous Gemara talking about all the people that are going to be having this incredible Olam Haba. What are the women going to have? How are they getting this Olam Haba? We don't have a version of Islam where the man is zeichet to the shivim basulais. And one of the women's zeicha was exactly as their Olam Haba. We have an egalitarian Olam Haba, the men, the women, everybody's zeicha. So the men of Zerk, if they're learning doing mitzvahs, and the woman, what are they doing? So obviously they can do mitzvahs. What else? What is they doing in Torah if they're not learning? We're making the assumption here, not going with Ben Azar, going with Rabbi Lezer, that Kamlam Isha Teres came Lam Tiflis, Rishu over there. So if that's the kind of situation that we're dealing with, that we're not teaching them Torah. So that Nashim Maizach, in fact, is a fundamental question. So and the answer is because even if they're not directly engaged in Torah, they still have the adjacencies to ensuring that Torah would be continued. Again, whether or not this applies today, and how much it applies, and all of that, whether Nashim are able to be zech at the same level, not being mitzvah Esa, we don't have time for now. Have a wonderful day.